Hello, everyone. I know that one of the tasks this week is to review and summarize a scientific article. And I think that there's actually a really good process to doing this. And so I'm going to run you through a little bit about how I look at scientific articles, how I review them. And it's a way to really, I think, read through and summarize without getting overwhelmed. So we'll walk through section by section the abstract, the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. And we're going to use this PTSD and service dog study as an example. So the title is Physical Activity and Heart Rate in PTSD in Patients, Moderation by Custody of a Service Dog. And it's written by the lead author is Steve Woodward, also all of these people are actually friends of mine. So I know their research and I know that their scientific approach and they're very solid, very oriented towards doing good science. So the abstract, it's really think of the abstract as like a movie trailer. Like you don't analyze it deeply, you just want the plot. And if you notice about a good movie trailer, it actually runs through the entirety of the movie, but it's just like in 60 seconds. So one of the few like four questions you can really ask when reading the abstract. One, what problem are they studying? Who did they study? What do they do? What do they find? You should be able to find this in a well-written abstract. Not all abstracts are well written, so you might not find it, or you might not find the specific answers that you're looking for. But in this study, the authors are studying PTSD, heart rate, and physical activity, specifically whether having custody of a service dog changes those outcomes. They studied U.S. military veterans and residential PTSD treatment. They collected objective heart rate and activity data, right? That was their observation. Um, and they used a within subjects design, meaning the same people were compared on days with and without the dog, right? And I'd love to hear your comments about the pros and cons of that type of study. Their main finding on days with the service dog, participants were more physically active and had slightly lower heart rates, even after accounting for activity. So if you can summarize the abstract in two or three sentences, you're off to a really strong start. So then let's go down to the introduction or the background. So this is the why this study exists, and it often gives you a lot of if you're doing your own research or doing your own literature review, this is chock full of information that can lead you down a number of different avenues. Um, so really, it's what gap in knowledge are the authors trying to fill? That's the question the introduction really answers. And so it really is about why this study needs to be done. In the introduction, you're really supposed to justify why you're doing this. And so the authors here review three key ideas. The first is that PTSD is linked to autonomic arousal and cardiovascular disease. And if a lot of these concepts are over your head, don't worry. Like some of them are over my head too. So this is pretty high level advanced research. Um, the second key idea is that dog ownership is associated with better cardiovascular outcomes. And the third is that many prior studies have a big problem, and they name that as selection bias. So the key insight is this: maybe healthier people are more likely to own dogs in the first place. So we really have to account for that selection bias in this study, and that's what they're really accounting for here. So the authors here they're saying we're going to set up a smarter design. We're going to do a within subject study where the same person is observed both with and without the service dog. That accounts for the selection bias. And so when you summarize an introduction, don't list all the citations. Just explain the problem, the limitation of past research, and how this study improves on it. So now we go over to the methods section. All right. So this is how the study was actually done. And I guess the rule of thumb here is, or the heuristic here, I don't like the saying rule of thumb. Um, could you explain the study design to a friend without using jargon? Could you just say how they did it? And a lot of pop psychology books do a really good job of doing this. They'll condense the methods in a really, really good way to give you a sense for everything that was involved. So the methods section, like this is usually where students start to panic, and the results section is where folks really panic, even researchers. Um, but you don't need to memorize it, right? Focus on four things. One, who were the participants? Two, what was the key variable being manipulated or observed? Three, what was being measured? And four, what kind of dog was used? And usually that's outlined really well. So here we have participant and setting, service service animal training intervention. It tells you the procedure, the study procedures, the psychiatric assessment, how they're measuring it. That's how they're measuring inclusion into the study. Ambulatory monitoring of heart rate and activity. Right, this is the thing that they're measuring. Then their statistical modeling. This is what statistical program that they're going to use to prove or disprove, like hopefully prove their hypothesis, right? And in this study, the participants were male veterans with PTSD. They alternated weeks with and without custody of a service dog. Heart rate and physical activity were measured where using wearable sensors. The design was within subjects, meaning each participant served as their own control. Now, you don't need to understand the statistics yet. Just recognize that the design helps reduce bias in this example. So now we go to our results. What did they find? So describe the heuristic here is to describe the results without interpreting them. You're just this is just the facts. This is just what the numbers say. You're not putting any meaning to it. You're just saying specifically what happened. Um, it's not why it happened, not why it matters, only what the data showed. So here are the key findings. Physical activity was higher on days when participants had the service dog. No interpretation, doesn't say why it matters, just the fact. Heart rate, once adjusted for activity level, was slightly lower on dog custody days. Again, not why, not why it matters, just what happened, or just what they found. And then third, PTSD severity did not explain these effects. Right? So they're saying the thing that they were trying to account for, you know, did not numerically or statistically explain. Right? Not why, not why it matters, just the data. So when you're summarizing results, stick to the neutral language. The data showed, the authors found. Save the interpretation for what we're going to go into next, which is the discussion. So there's a lot of, there is a lot of, sorry, I'm trying to get to the discussion here. Am I missing it? There it is. Number 4, discussion. So this is really how the authors interpret their findings and what their limits are. And when you get really good at going between the results and the discussion sections, you can really start to find like, hey, wait, I don't know if I'd make that interpretation based on that data, right? You can really start to critique papers and discern really good science from maybe stuff that's not quite so good. So the discussion is really where the authors put their findings in context. So here they suggest that service dogs may increase daily physical activity, that they may reduce extra heart rate linked to emotional arousal. And I think that in this study, it's really about heart rate variability. And it could potentially, they make the claim that it could potentially reduce long term cardiovascular risk, right? But importantly, they are cautious, Right? They clearly state their limitations, and a well done article, a really well founded scientific article will have a lot of limitations. You have to acknowledge what you didn't account for. And so in this study, they say, hey, it was only a small sample. We also realized that we only had male veterans that were participants in this study. So the generalizability may not be strong enough to extend out to the general population. We also acknowledged that these were short term effects. We only measured this over a very small, relatively small period of time. And these dogs were still in training. So we can't account for the effect of if there's a completely trained service dog. So a strong so having those limitations really say like, hey, we realize where we might not be able to account for. We realize that where we might not be able to make claims. We're making these claims about these effects, but we also want to caveat and make sure that we're are responsibly or kind of optimistically cautious. And so a strong discussion always does two things. It explains why the findings matter and acknowledges what the study cannot conclude. That balance is a hallmark of good science. So if we think about how to write your own summary, when you write your own summary, aim for one short paragraph per section, or just a couple of sentences or so. So for the abstract, what was studied and found? Introduction, why was the study needed? Methods, how was it done? Results, what happened? Discussion, why does it matter and what are the limits? Now, I know I've also listed a bunch of questions for you to really consider in doing your summaries. And so I definitely want you to include those. But if we're doing brass tacks here, if we're doing just, you know, what can you remember about each section that really helps you to orient to the material? It's those things that I just mentioned, and I can post them. I'll post them as in the announcement when I post this video as well. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm always available. Keep asking me questions. Keep bringing the questions forward. I love to hear them. All right. Take care. Bye.